We can now bring in Danny Citrinowicz, former head of the Iran branch in the Research and Analysis Division in Israeli Defense Intelligence. He's currently non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Now, in the past few days, we have seen Israel go after top Iranian scientists, the chief of staff of Iran's armed forces, the commander of the IRGC, and others. Talk us through just how far Israel has managed to penetrate the Islamic Republic.
Well, definitely when we see the results of what happened between Thursday and Friday show that Israel has internal operational superiority in Iran. It's a lengthy process. It didn't start, of course, yesterday. Years of in a making in terms of building the understanding where the people are and also inserting the relevant capabilities that enables to hit them in a precise way. So definitely Israel managed to cripple the command and control of Iran before its air attack. So it was important in a way that it will prevent also the Iranian from retaliating immediately after Israel initiated the attack. And like we see even today, how Iran is finding it's very hard to mobilize all of the forces to attack Israel using its surface-to-surface missile because of what Israel did on Thursday. So certainly the penetration was deep in a way that it really crippled Iran in the first hours of the attack.
How long in advance would an operation like this been planned, considering that Israel has been targeting Iranian nuclear scientists in the past as well? And last year, let's not forget, you went after Ismail Haniyeh last July in Tehran while he was staying at a guest house.
I think that we have to remember that looking at what Israel tried to do against, especially the Iranian nuclear project, is Israel was targeted pinpoint activities, meaning that, like you said, targeted scientists, sabotaging in also many ways, but it really was some sort looking for a silver bullet operation that will halt, that will prevent Iranian from advancing. This time, Israel took the initiative and actually went to a war that meant not to stall, but to destroy the Iranian nuclear capabilities. And that takes years in the making. It's just gathering all the information, inserting and building the operational infrastructure, and even more than that, simultaneously attack from within Iran and the Air Force itself. So definitely those are years in the making. But it is important to say one important thing, that Israel could have done this operation because of the weakness of Hezbollah. People tend to forget that Hezbollah was actually the element that deterred Israel even more than the Iranian capabilities. Once Hezbollah's capabilities deteriorated and Israel able to kill, to destroy what we call strategic air defense capabilities of Iran in the night of the 26th of October last year, the road was open to Tehran, and with the capabilities that Israel had in Iran itself, managed to actually initiate the operation in a very successful way.
But how do you explain the weaknesses within the Islamic Republic that Israel was able to penetrate so much so that you can even take out the supreme leader? So was it because Iran was focused on its proxies in the region like Hezbollah? Was that it, that they left their eye off the ball?
It's one option that you can explain, that Iran are highly focused on the what we call the axis of resistance. But I think it added to other things. First, you mentioned the killing of Ismail Haniyeh. This should have told the Iranians that Israel has the upper hand in terms of operationally and intelligence-wise in Iran. So the Iran actually became some sort of a playing ground of the Mossad. The Mossad did so many things that Iran couldn't prevent. So this should have signaled to the Iranians. But I think really what happened that day is the fact that Israel deceived the Iranians. Because, all those leaders that you mentioned, the commander of the IRGC, the chief of staff Barrieri, and Khatem al-Anbiya Rashid, all of them were in the houses, meaning that they really thought that Israel is not going to attack until the talks between the regime and the U.S. will collapse. So I think the element of surprise was crucial here.
I want to talk about, Danny, stay with us, because we earlier spoke with the spokesperson of Israel's foreign ministry about what exactly the end game was for Israel. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The end game is to remove this double threat. There shouldn't be Iranian capability of producing hundreds, thousands, and dozens of thousands of ballistic missiles, and Iran should never have nuclear weapon. Change of the regime is not part of these objectives. And of course, one can never know what are the results, but this is not part of our objectives.
Danny, let me bring you in once again. There you heard of what the actual goal for Israel is to go after Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities. But in recent days, there has been chatter about regime change. Is that also starting to become one of the goals, even though it's unofficial?
One cannot ignore it. You can hear what Netanyahu is saying in his speeches and interviews. You can see what the Air Force is doing in the last days, attacking not only enrichment and the missile capabilities of Iran, and also you can see how Netanyahu pressuring Trump to get into the war itself. I think not only to attack Fordo, the most important enrichment facility of Iran, but also using Trump in order to join forces and actually toppling the regime. I think that Netanyahu believes that the only solution that you prevent the Iranians from returning back from building the capabilities in the nuclear and the missile is toppling the regime. Yes, it's not formal. Nobody declared it, but Netanyahu actually, and most of the speakers of the government hint that. And what you see in terms of the Air Force definitely indicate the fact that Israel intends and wishes that regime change will be happening due to the attacks of us, but hoping that the U.S. will join in, and then it will be easier, as Israel sees it, to complete this mission.
Is the goal to take out the supreme leader? Because Donald Trump says he as well knows where the Ayatollah is, but he is safe for now. Is that the ultimate goal, to get rid of him?
I think when you're talking about regime change in Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, who controls Iran since 1989, is a key figure. Now, it's not that Israel is looking at the Israel history that is wishes to kill Arab or Muslim leaders. But I think that Israel, and again, based on what Prime Minister Netanyahu said in multiple interviews that he gave in the last couple of days, see Khamenei as the regime. So if Israel will seek to go to the regime change, but probably has to do something in Khamenei itself. Now, there is maybe a tension between Trump and Netanyahu on this subject, and Netanyahu believes that no escalation will occur after, if and when will target Khamenei, because I really think that Netanyahu believes that Khamenei represents the regime, and without it, the regime will find it very hard to survive. But I have to say something important. We know the devil that we know. We don't know the devil that we don't know. And sometimes, even if we do something against Khamenei or the US or whatever, then we can find worse development. For example, the RGC taking over, or a complete disaffection of the Iranian state. And please remember, they still have nuclear capabilities. So we should very careful in thinking that we can topple the regime by using Air Force alone. But even if we do so, we have to remember that probably sometimes the worst can come after we are toppling someone that you already know, with the pros and cons of his behavior.
You raise an interesting point that we don't want the devil we don't know, because the French President Emmanuel Macron was asked about this very issue as the G7 wrapped up in Canada. Take a listen to what Emmanuel Macron had to say.
No to military action aimed at regime change, because no one knows what comes next. Haven't we collectively seen the consequences this has had in the region and beyond? Does anyone think what was done in Iraq in 2003 was a good idea? Does anyone think what was done in Libya last decade was a good idea? No.
Danny, the French president raises an interesting point. We have Iraq, we have Libya as examples to illustrate how regime change doesn't necessarily work. And Iranians themselves who are outside the country and those within, even if they don't agree with how the leadership works, the supreme leader, etc., the theocracy in the country, they believe that change has to come organically from within. You can't kill your way and expect change to happen.
I think if we do that, we're entering what we call uncharted territory. Nobody knows what will happen then. Nobody. We can assess, but we cannot know. And that's important to say. And, people are thinking that the regime is weak. And yes, the regime has challenges in terms of legitimacy. But what we're seeing now, mostly in Iran, is people are rallying around the flag, thinking that the attack is not against the regime, it's against the Iranian people. So we have to be very cautious.
Yes, there are segments of society that are rallying around the flag, but let's be honest, most people are very worried and scared.
And definitely, but people are worried and scared, not saying that they will try to topple the regime itself. So we have to be very cautious in what we are thinking we can achieve by air attacks alone. And sometimes, like President Macron said, change has to be organic. So if people think that we'll kill Khamenei and everything will be heaven, then maybe they're mistaken, because if they want to change the regime in so many ways, they have to be very careful in what we are thinking that will come after. But don't think not Israel and not the US has a complete program what to do after Khamenei. So we can find ourselves in a worse situation than we were before. So we have to be very careful of that. But again, we have to wait to see what the US will do, because if the US will join in Israel, chances of completing this task are higher. Israel alone, I don't think, is able to topple this regime.
Because there's a report out in the Wall Street Journal that Israel is running low on Arrow missile interceptors. If that is true and the US doesn't step in, what happens? Can Israel continue to defend itself from Iranian missiles?
I think it's a war of resilience between the Iranian missiles and the Israeli interceptors. I think that if the US is not entering the war, Israel should push to end this war. Because at the end of the day, if we find ourselves in a war of attrition, it doesn't serve our interest. More than that, it can erode our amazing achievements in the war itself. If US entering the war, it's a different world. But without it, and again, I don't know what the situation of the Arrow comparing to the missile, of course, but definitely continuing this war with the economical price that we are paying, and of course the death of our, goes without saying, the death of our civilian and the fear in the Israeli society, I think this is something that I'm not sure we can sustain for a longer period of time. And without American entering, I don't think there is any other thing to achieve in this war, because we already severely damaged the Iranian nuclear program and the Iranian missile capabilities.
Danny, Benjamin Netanyahu, you know this better than me, has been warning of that Iran is close to acquiring a nuclear weapon all the way back to 1992, that Iran was just a few years away of acquiring a nuclear weapon. But this March, we had the U.S. Director of National Intelligence who said that the American Intelligence Committee had assessed that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. So who's right here? Because Netanyahu has been talking about this threat for years, so much so that he's being made fun of on late-night television in the United States right now.
Well, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't think, and I saw the recent declarations coming from Israel, I don't think that even in Israel, someone claimed that Khamenei instructed the build-up of a weapons group and decided to build a bomb. I think what we had a group of scientists that actually did some sort of probably theoretical work. And I think the debate between the U.S. community, inter-community, and the Israeli one is how much really this work push Iran towards a bomb itself. Israel claimed that it pushed a week or weeks if decision will be made. And Americans think that it's only theoretical, returning back to 2003 Ahmad project, when Iran really tried to build a bomb, and it's not pushing them far away. So I think this is around the debate. It's not that Iran was on the verge of building a bomb, but on the other side, probably we had scientists that actually did work with connected to weaponization. So between the two, I think the truth is in the middle. And again, regarding Netanyahu and his declaration, I don't know what pushed him back then, but maybe Israel really had information that changed the picture. But again, we have to emphasize that it's not what we assume in terms of Khamenei instructing them to build a bomb. They did something probably that crosses any red line or threshold regarding weaponization, but they weren't close in a way that there were days before a bomb. So I think that is really the core, the essence of the discussion between the American and the Israeli intel community.
Danny, this conflict with Iran is brewing. It's been a couple of days. You spoke about Iranians rallying around the flag, but we've also seen Israelis rally around the flag, given that just maybe last week itself, there was war fatigue. People are tired of the war over in Gaza. They want their hostages home. How many fronts can Israel fight on realistically, given that the country has been at war for 20 months in Gaza now?
That's a very important question. And I think also connected to that is the fact that we are fighting a war we never fought. It's a war 2,000 kilometers from home. It's a war that we are suffering from advanced missile that hitting Israel and hitting hard, but it's also a war that Israel is really able to cripple down the core of the center of gravity of what we call the axis of resistance. And I think that unlike other wars, like the Hamas and Hezbollah, I don't think it can sustain, both sides cannot sustain it for a longer period of time. Iran because of the air superiority of Israel, and Israel because of the fact that eventually Israel is paying a price, like explained before. So I think really the battle, assuming that the US won't enter the war, because that would change everything. If US won't entering the war, then I think we can sustain it for a couple of more weeks, but I think we have to push for political solution in order to preserve everything that we already achieved, because if not, we'll find ourselves in a war that we cannot win. It will really jeopardize the achievements that we have in the operation itself. We don't need to outreach. We need to think hardly what we can achieve, but also what we cannot achieve in the war itself, mainly regime change.
Danny, we've spoken about the successive wins Mossad has had over the past few days, the level of penetration within the Islamic Republic. We've seen Hezbollah fighters have their pagers blow up again, Mossad operation. I'm just curious, given all these successes and all that Mossad knows, how is it possible that October 7th was allowed to happen?
We have a couple of explanations to that. I think one of that can be that Israel focused on Iran and Iran activity in Syria and neglected the interconnection in Gaza. It could also be connected to the fact that Israel thought highly on the Iranians and thought that Hamas is not really a threat, so we can actually do whatever it wants in Gaza and there won't be any threat. And of course, there was the deception aspect of Hamas. So I think it's probably a combination of three. So we cannot compare between one and the other. The Israeli intel community is strong. It was strong on 7th of October and it's strong today, but you had priorities. And probably in order to build the understanding about the axis itself, we paid a severe price in our ability to understand what's happening in Gaza. And together with the deception of Hamas, unfortunately, and a lot of bad things that happened 7th of October, we suffered a severe blow 7th of October. But obviously, it shows in the last operation in Iran that we overcome the intel and operation activity in the IDF, especially the Air Force. We overcome in achieving great achievements, especially connected to the achievements that we made against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So those things are amazing, but it's the same intel community. But as we know, there are differences how you look at the different geographical location and how much you invest in each location. It depending on how you perceive the threat. And probably Israel perceived the threat in a situation that it was much more serious than the Hamas threat.
Danny Citrinowicz, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.